Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of You Can Call Me Karen. This week, we are discussing the P. Diddy documentary on Netflix called Sean Combs' The Reckoning. For those that are millennials and grew up in the 90s, I think a lot of these events will feel very familiar to you. And for those that are less familiar, please be aware that this is my trigger warning. We will be discussing violence, sexual assault, and other things of that nature. So listen carefully or skip this if you may be triggered by those topics. We also discuss a couple of quite non-controversial Karen stories this week. I think we all tended to agree. So buckle up, and here we go.
And the green one, little fox, and the blue one, fox, and the yellow one, and the little and the fox, and the green one.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of You Can Call Me Karen. This is Karen, and I'm joined by my two millennial co-hosts, Steph and Manny. Say hello.
Hi. It's time to get loud. It's time to represent. Karen, Steph, what time is it?
I was ready for OSU, but okay.
I mouthed OSU as well. We were there together. Okay, so this week we are covering the P. Diddy
You just went
documentary.
right on with it.
Yeah. Listen, I got shit to do, girl. We have stuff to
Also,
talk
did
about.
you-
Perfect. This week, we are covering the P. Diddy documentary on Netflix. And for our loyal listener or listeners, you'll know we need to do one thing before we get to Diddy. And that is this week, ladies, who you calling Karen?
Who you calling, Karen?
I will go first.
Okay.
My Karen is so over like the holiday break. One night Steve was out of town for visiting a friend, and so I had kind of a girl day with Quinn. But one thing that I knew in my head I wanted to do was once Quinn went to bed, I was gonna go ahead and splurge and rent Wicked for Good. Because I'd seen Wicked but hadn't seen For Good yet, and it's still in the theater now, but I just Steve doesn't do musicals, and I just was like, when will I ever get to see it? So I was like,
What?
perfect.
Steve doesn't do musicals?
No, he does not. And yeah,
I thought I
So-
liked him.
I put Quinn to bed and rented Wicked for Good, which I loved. Like, oh my gosh, it was
I
wonderful.
haven't seen it yet, but I will. That is
Yeah.
actually one movie that I will.
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. But my Karen of the week then is Madame Morrible.
Hey, more.
She is such trash. I was just like so angry with her because like obviously Wicked has a lot of
Layers.
relevancy and depth because of what it represents and like the oppression and the labeling and the othering
Mm-hmm.
and the images that they use to label Elphaba as wicked is very
Mhm.
triggering for me because
Yes.
looking at it from the perspective of just, after just in the United States, and there's lots of articles that look just like that, making Black people look to be scary and whatever. And so, and I know that's the point, hopefully that's the point of the movie is how easily, message propaganda is what
Yeah.
that is. And she just was so like, she would so elegantly deliver like the most awful lines, and she would just be like there was the scene when Elphaba like comes flying in and she's like, wicked, the wicked witch of the west is here. And and I'm just like, or like it just reminded me of those like Karen phone calls when like the one where she was like, I'm being attacked, you know? I'm like, Madam
Yes.
Morrible, you are
Yes.
King Karen.
You are.
You're an actor, like the character Madam Morrible. Obviously, the actress is playing a woman, but I'm saying Madam Morrible is hyping up and creating something, and she knows Elphaba. You know what I mean?
Right.
And she knows what she is capable of. And because Elphaba was not doing what she wanted her to do, she villainized her.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Preach
And
on
so, anyway,
Are you what?
she said preach on it. So anyway, that's my. I was like, yeah,
I just had to Google her to make sure I was thinking of the right character because it's been about a year since I saw the first Wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And I never saw, or maybe I did read Wicked, so I must have known this name, but I forgot the name Morrible is like literally the word horrible.
Horrible.
I'm like, it's a little on the nose, but
Madam Morrible is horrible.
yeah.
That's a good one.
She is the ultimate Karen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. I might reference them in this episode, but there is a new podcast that I sent you guys called Diabolical Lies that unpacks. It's not about like what we were just talking about. I just want to give them a shout out because they did such a wonderful job, but they uncover like a lot of things with Wicked in regard to like body image and body shaming and body positivity. I just wanted to give them a shout out because
I forgot you shared that, and I'm literally adding it to my library now. So
yeah, Diabolical Lies. And the episode was, is there a skinny apocalypse in Hollywood? And that's all I can think about with Wicked right now. Like, I don't know. It just the way that the research that they did. Again, I think I might reference something in here. It made me think about a conversation that we'll have today with the patriarchy. And I don't know. It was a fabulous episode. So if you're looking for a new podcast to get into, Diabolical Lies came highly recommended on my TikTok algorithm.
Well, I will be listening to that one for sure.
Okay, so my Karen, I'm going back. It's another Chad, but I'm going all the way back.
You love your Chads, by the way. I very much appreciate that.
Thanks.
As a white woman named Karen, I appreciate that it's a Chad from time to time.
Well, I was looking through my list and I was like, oh, I want to share this one. I think you guys will really appreciate it. So we're going to go and this is like there's probably something here, but we're going to go all the way back to the 1600s.
Whoa.
And my Chad is Christopher Columbus.
Period.
And I'm going to tell you how this came to be on my Karen list that I keep on my notes app. So I was observing a student teacher who was doing a lesson on Christopher Columbus, and she decided to take a really big risk and do put Christopher Columbus on trial. And she divided the kids in half, and some of them were for and some of them were against, gave them articles that they had to find within the article, like whether you're for Columbus coming into America and colonizing America or whether you're against it. And the reason why I loved this so much is because, and there were people in the middle who were the jurors, which also, oh my God, look at all these synchronicities today with like P. Diddy and the trial and all that. But so there were also students in the middle who were the jurors who were supposed to hear both sides and like come up with a verdict on whether or not him colonizing was, good for the world or whatever.
This is an excellent lesson.
Yes.
Very good.
This was her second observation. She hasn't even fully taken over the classroom yet. She had only been halfway taken. Yes, she is premier. I know. And that's what I told her. I was like, you're going to be excellent. I'm like, keep going, keep going. There are obviously things we can tweak and refine, but the fact that was the heart of the lesson, I was like, yes. So anyway, so she has these kids in the middle who are supposed to listen. And, she told me that she has they're very good at verbal processing, but their written work is not that strong. So she wanted this to be the prerequisite to some writing. And what she found was by doing that, some of her, I don't want to say lower level, but like some of her not as strong writers were able to articulate very high level dialogue in the conversation. And let me just tell you, one of the students, what she said to the pro Columbus people. She said, you said that Christopher Columbus coming over here was good because he gave them civilization. What makes you think they were uncivilized to start with?
Mm-hmm. What grade is this class?
It was ninth grade.
Wow.
Yeah. She said, what makes you think they were uncivilized to start with? Zang.
Let's go.
Blew my mind. I was like, yes, this is exactly the conversation that we're having right now. And it's so important that a ninth grader express that. Someone who normally doesn't talk in class was able to make that connection of, wait, hold up. Who are you to say that Taínos
I
didn't
wonder
have
if this is
civilization?
I wonder if this is like one of those classes that girl or all of the students will remember. I have certain classes, certain high school experiences that stuck with me, and I can think very specifically about this teacher, this class, this topic, whatever. And there's only a few of them. It feels like this is one of those where, and it's really cool that it's coming from a student teacher. It's not even like their full-time educator. So cool.
That's why, to Steph and I's point, we were like, wow, because that's the kind
really
of stuff
cool.
that you can't really teach,
To come to that on her own is pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So to witness that as a mentor, I was like, and also Christopher Columbus, you are the first Chad to ever step foot in the Americas
that we know of.
Documented. History has its eyes on you.
What is I think Michael Che does a bit about Karen's white women coming into neighborhoods. This is it. He's like, if you want to solve the challenges in the Middle East, just send in a bunch of white ladies in a Starbucks, and they're gonna come in and be like, this is mine's now.
This is mine now. Yeah.
And I feel like that was Christopher Columbus. He showed up 100%. And he was like, this is mine's now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great bit.
Oh my gosh. I love that she did that, because when I taught 8th grade English, the team I was on, the social studies teacher, 8th grade history is U.S. history. And so she and I would partner a lot, because something our 8th graders have to do is DBQs, or document based. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but our listeners should know it stands for document-based
query or questions,
or
document-based questions. So sometimes we would pick one of the DBQs that they were doing in social studies, and then I could take it and turn it into an argumentative essay. So we'd kind of work together.
I love that.
And one of the things that we did was Christopher Columbus, and we would take a look at, articles written by Christopher Columbus, or him declaring what, he's found and done. But then look at there's a picture book that looks at his coming to America through the eyes of Native Americans. And so you use those two pieces of evidence to argue, is he, I can't remember what the question was, but it was something to the effect of was he a hero?
Or villain, yeah.
A hero or villain.
Yeah.
And
I
so,
love that.
but the trial and, kind of making them take the evidence and ride with it, and whether they agreed or not, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. Similarly, I saw something I sent this to her after. You made 2 points that I know we probably have to wrap up on this, but I talked to her about that, what we call in education, that horizontal integration of bringing in the English teacher into helping, you don't, as a social studies teacher, have to be the one to teach writing. That's where you collaborate with somebody else on your grade level. And you share resources in that capacity, which I love. I think that's the key to unlocking making education better, if we did more horizontal and vertical integration. But also I saw on Threads, similarly to that hero versus villain, a woman did those almost crime scene silhouettes where you outline your body, right? So she had her students kind of like outline their body, and then they like they drew a line down the middle, and like half of it was like colonized versus colonizer kind of thing, where like half of the body was like of the person who colonized and like other was of the people who were colonized by that like region. It was really fascinating visual of like, this is the complete story. It's not just about people who came and colonized the region, you know, it's also about the people who were existing there prior to, and what did they look like, you know, and what's their humanity behind that. So anyway, thanks for letting me go down that.
Oh, and the book was called Encounter. Sorry. Look it up if you've never seen it. The picture book is called Encounter, and it's a beautiful picture book through the lens of Native Americans. Sorry, I didn't mean to like, but it's beautiful.
I wrote it down. Yay.
This conversation made me think of, I know I've talked about revisionist history before, Malcolm Gladwell, if that's right?
Yes.
Anyways, a lot of this discussion makes me think of all of the work he does to unpack historical events that are not, you know, that were taught only from the eyes of the conqueror. And so he kind of brings in a different angle, and it's always fascinating. So for our listeners who are looking for another good podcast and haven't come across that one by some miracle, there you go. All right. So I think it is time to turn from our Karens and talk about another, maybe Karen?
You just heard our Karen stories, but we can't be the only ones. If you've had a Karen or Chad encounter or confessional, you've been a Karen yourself, we'd love to hear from you. Wherever you listen, click on the link in our show notes and text us your Karen stories.
So this week, we are talking about the Diddy documentary on Netflix. Many of you
say the real name of it, because there's been a couple that when I went to go search for it, I was like, what? It's called The Reckoning.
It's P. Diddy, The Reckoning, right?
Yeah.
Let me just make sure. Yeah, Sean Combs, The Reckoning is what it's called.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is a documentary that is produced by 50 Cent, if you will, who certainly has an agenda. And I sent you both, I'm going on a little tangent here, but I sent you both a very short YouTube video, which I will also link here, that does a very quick, what the hell is 50's problem with Diddy? And because I didn't know either, but I know he's been trolling Diddy for like years, and 50 Cent is like the king of holding a grudge and doing a good job with it. And this video basically sums it up as, when 50 Cent like came onto the scene, he was huge. If you remember, I think it was my freshman year of college, and it was like Indie Club. That album was everything. It was
Karen
everywhere.
loved 50.
I love 50.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
he's also from Chicago too, right? So like that.
No, I think he's from Atlanta. He's not a Chicago guy. We have R. Kelly, whoops, and Common and Chance the
Kanye
Rapper.
West.
We've got a good little crew, but not 50. Anyways, this video basically just sums it up as like, when 50 came on the scene, Diddy was like, I can't have somebody who's at the top of the game not be part of my circle. So he called him up to try to like hang. And I'm not going to do this story justice, but essentially what it is 50 was like, he made me feel uncomfortable. He was asking me really weird questions. I was getting really bad vibes. And so not interested. Like from that point forward, he was just, he didn't trust him. He didn't like him. He said he made him feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, damn, he's got a good judge of character. That which Chappelle does a bit about that as well, which we'll get to. Anyways, it is important to keep in mind that 50 Cent is the one who produced this doc, because clearly he does have an agenda and he was focused on that. So always important to keep that in mind. But I do feel like he did a good job of finding very credible witnesses, demonstrating a long history and pattern of behavior, and even using footage that was commissioned by Diddy in the days leading up to his arrest. So he was using footage that Diddy was like well aware of, you know, and had paid for. So it was like using his own receipts against him. This doc was fascinating to understand the person he was when not in front of a camera, or not in front of a camera that he didn't think he had control over. And it seemed to corroborate a lot of the stories that have come out in recent years about his pattern of abuse, his short-temperedness, his desire to get to the top no matter the cost or who got in his way, and even capitalizing on people's humanity and death, which I thought the documentary did a really good job of bringing to life. So overall, I think no major surprises with this doc. But it did show a pattern of consistent behavior throughout his life and his career. I don't know if you two had a view of his childhood before this. I felt the stories about his childhood were particularly interesting. They humanized him, which I thought was an interesting approach to take at the very start of this documentary, which is clearly about making him a villain. And it definitely did a good job of like laying the groundwork for why he is the person that he is today. Overall, though, and I want your reactions and takes as well, I felt like it left me wanting more, the documentary as a whole. I felt like they breezed over other celebrity involvement and these like so-called freak offs where you know, that's what led to all of the like salacious headlines and things that we think of now when it comes to his arrest and his trial. There were a few celebrities that were like would talk about being at these parties but not part of these freak offs, and they, you know, they were questioned, or like little clips of interviews with them were highlighted. But I'm like, where's all the hot goss around these freak offs and all the baby oil, and like, where is all of that? And it was like literally very minor references to throughout this 4-part series. But yeah, I don't know. Any reactions there? Do you feel the same, or how did you feel about that bit?
There was a lot in what you just said.
I just mean, broadly speaking, did you feel fulfilled by this documentary, or do you feel like anything was missing?
I felt like, to answer your question about, like, are you saying that you were hoping or thought that this would get more into the parties and
All the
who attended
headlines.
the headlined kind of things that were surrounding? Then yeah, I don't feel like it really skimmed over that at that last episode that showed all the baby oil that was found does not match like what the news was saying about how much baby oil. And like, so I just felt like I wanted to know, like, it just brought it up, and it was almost like, you already heard about this, we were not really going to get into it. But
I wonder if it's more that there's so many people involved in the freak offs that like that would be
Incriminate.
more legality for him to put that in there than what he's
That's where
Yes.
I'm going exactly.
Yeah.
It felt like,
because
felt
when
like-
I see those headlines, I don't feel like because I feel like Diddy is known for throwing parties, and I feel like anybody went to his parties, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they were involved in, some of the, more abusive and like, eccentric and outside of the box, sexual interactions. Just because you're at a party hosted by Diddy, like his famous white party, people are like, well, Leonardo DiCaprio was there and so was there, but I'm like, I imagine everybody was there. Like, you brought up Chappelle, like he's like, I've been to his house, like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are, participating in some of the things that, like, Cassie outlines in her testimonies and stuff, and some of the more dark things that were happening. So
right. And to your point, Manny, it was probably like a legal decision where they're like, we're not going to throw a bunch of people's names out here without the receipts, or they didn't want to pay for all the legal fees that would ensue as a result. But I think that is something just to keep in mind. Like, I do believe that Sean Combs is kind of a monster and did some really terrible things. But it was very clear that 50 Cent in producing this documentary was focused exclusively on him and almost intentionally kept other major celebrities' names out of it. And so I just feel like there's more to the story. I feel like in watching this, I was like, ugh, like now I need to know the rest. So that's how
Yeah,
I walked away.
maybe. I just think, you know, in the beginning of every episode, I did not want more. I mean, 4 episodes, 4 hour-long episodes on one person is a lot of consumption for
Yeah,
stuff
for
that
sure.
doesn't directly involve me. But I think at the beginning of every episode and at the end of every episode, he was making the point that this is what he's on trial for. And so they were trying to show and illustrate the crime from that perspective. He's not on trial for the freak offs, you know, he's not on trial for the parties. So I think that played into the storytelling of
And I gotta say too, like when
the
I was
documentary.
watching, I think where the documentary started and the trajectory of like the chronicling of Diddy's rise to fame and, you know, the internship and into the this, into the that. So I wanted more about his life. Like I felt like once it was very detailed up until about 1999 and that club shooting where J-Lo was there, and I just wanted them to chronicle more. Like I wanted more about the continued trajectory. I feel like it went from there straight to 2025.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, whoa, go back. I want more about the middle. That I felt like that's what I wanted.
I feel like at that point they bounced around a little bit,
Yes,
you
and I got a
know?
little confused too.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I don't want to spend the whole time here today beating up whether this was a good production or not, because I think the content itself was fascinating. And as I mentioned before, I think they found some really credible people to talk about who Diddy was growing up and in his early career days. And it speaks a lot to like his character and the type of psychology, I guess, that you're dealing with, which I thought was really fascinating. And just, you know, further solidifies that it's not coincidental that all of the things that happened around him happened. You know, like he clearly was an instigator of everything. Okay, so I have a number of questions that I kind of want to tackle. So let's start with just one thing that stood out to you or one thing you didn't know before watching this. And let's try to keep it to one because I've got a bunch more I'd like to cover. I can get us going if you need, but if you have thoughts,
I think what shocked me at the end, and Luke and I had, like, we were both like, what? It was in episode 4 when that one journalist came in and she was describing what the journalistic experience was like in the courtroom and how Diddy had a team of people who were trying to like paint a different narrative. And then so my like big shock there was like, then the clips of people on TikTok who bought into that and like people on social media, I was like, I did not see any of that in my algorithm when this was happening. And so I was like, this is just like another example of like my algorithm is like curated to like my
which is really scary.
Yeah.
On both sides of that equation, it's really scary.
Yeah. I was like, I had no idea that people were like actually rooting for him during this point.
Yeah.
And, like, I was so surprised by that. I don't know why. I guess there's always going to be people who are, but he has a lot of like yes men in his corner. And
He's very
enablers.
calculated.
Yeah. And so like that like level of calculation that it even seeped into like this social media where people were like saying free Diddy, like I did not see any of that. And I was so surprised to see that at the end of the documentary.
Yeah. I know you said to pick one, so I'm gonna pick one, but I have several things that I didn't know or that I was surprised by. This is hard to pick one, but the one I'm gonna go with was I was really surprised to see him partying with his sons like that.
I know.
Like,
okay.
and it made me feel like those boys, like are like, it's like an abusive situation there.
Oh,
And,
yeah, big time.
I was
No,
just shocked.
I didn't think that. I thought this is the generational cycle. Like, that's why they
Yeah.
planted
Oh,
that's
Like,
why
they're,
they
like,
planted
totally
that in the
brainwashed.
beginning. When they planted in the beginning about, like, the pimp, the,
Mhm.
like that style of, like, what was it's not like a dandy, but like dandyism or whatever. Like I thought that
Mhm.
was like a generational cycle of like, this is how our family's lineage is. Like,
Yeah,
Oh
well,
my
and
all
they
gosh.
claim
didn't
to
Makes me
royalty.
sick to my
say it.
stomach.
They didn't outright say it about his childhood, but they were, like, alluding to the parties that his mom would have and
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
people that were around and what he was witnessing as a kid,
Yes.
and it is,
Mhm.
like,
And that clearly
exactly
his
that,
dad
and he's just
came from
reinforcing
money.
that with his kids.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, I thought that was just a part of like, this is how our family, this is like normal for our family. Like,
Mhm.
I didn't think that they were abused by any means. I think that they
But
want
don't
this
you think Diddy
level
was
of power.
abused? Like, the exposure and the young age, like,
Yeah.
it's not abusive, like, direct, but it's like when you have early exposure, like, I've seen, students like exposed to way more than they should have at a young age, and how that can be traumatic and
Yeah.
formative. And now he, instead of like breaking the cycle, he is doing the same thing, like exposing his kids,
Yeah, which
Mhm.
is,
and
I
it's
think, a form of abuse for sure. I mean, it
Mhm.
is. Yeah, like, those kids have trauma, but they don't know,
different.
maybe they don't necessarily know yet that that is traumatic, the experiences that they've lived through. And then they allude to him and his son. They allege, that him and his son shot that one guy who's still, like, unidentified, or at least in the documentary was unidentified, in the recording studio. And it's like, yeah, this is a cycle of abuse. So maybe abuse isn't the right word, but those, yeah.
I know.
Steph, that's something that they
I'd love
don't.
to find a different word for abuse, but it's a
Yeah.
good placeholder right now. I can't fully connect because there's several other victims in here who I feel like I don't want to victimize Sean and his sons this in that way yet, and I don't know why I feel constraint around that, but like I feel like
I don't feel
I feel there's a different name for it, but abuse is a good placeholder.
Mhm.
I can settle for abuse as the word
Yeah.
here. I'm just not sure.
I know what you mean.
Right.
It's
I
like
hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, Manny, but I feel like what Karen said at the beginning, where the fact that Diddy was humanized at the beginning, and you're kind of seeing how he was raised and things that happened, and even just the discussion of his mom, beating him, and them fighting, and that kind of stuff. It does, and I see what you're saying is like there are actual victims, and they were abused, and they were all that kind of stuff, and Diddy is the culprit, and he is in prison and should be, and all that kind of stuff. But what stood out to me was seeing that cycle continue with his kids. And
yeah,
I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to see his kids
as
with
part
him
of.
as part of what he was up to.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that though, because they didn't even address it. Like, they kept referencing, I can't remember his one son's name, but Justin Combs. They kept referencing Justin Combs, but they never actually outright said that is his son. And I
Mhm.
kept being like, is this his son? Like, in the room with him when he's talking about things he's done with women, and like there's just like the boundaries have, like, so many boundaries felt crossed to me.
Mhm.
That I should have Googled it, but I kept questioning, like, maybe it's just a coincidence that this guy has the last name, the same last
Mhm.
name, because it's so gross to me to be just,
And his
yeah,
other
like,
son too was there.
yeah, there
That's
was
what I
two of them,
mean.
right? In a lot of the video.
Sorry, I know we had to move on, but I just want to rebuttal for a second. Like, I know you guys didn't watch Game of Thrones, so this reference is probably going to go over your head. But for our listener who might not be Bree or Celia or Maggie, who might understand the Game of Thrones reference, it reminds me of the empire, like, that they are building, like almost very similar to the Kardashians. Like, these people have built this reality for themselves, and they, like, I don't know, like, it's rooted in evil, you know?
Yeah.
And like, just the continuation of building the empire for power is why I don't want to attach abuse to them. I can't.
Yeah, like
I don't have
abuse
the
is
language to, but abuse is what we see. That's why I was like, there's no,
yeah.
whatever is his psychosis, there's not a name for it in the DSM yet. But like, obviously, yes, there's some way that he took like what he saw as a child and then like
internalized it.
internalized it into this monstrous
Yeah.
thing. But like, I just think about like kings and queens here and like fictional stories of like, but that's like the birth of like an evil empire, you know? And like, we don't go around like saying, oh, but they're an evil empire because they were abused as a kid. We're like, no, you're an evil empire. And
Well, it's
you know,
a little
good
bit
people
like
are gonna come
chicken
in.
or egg. Like,
Yeah.
we don't know what came first. Are they that way because of the abuse they
Oh,
experienced?
it's
Right.
like villain
Or-
origin story.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah,
villain
it's like-
origin story.
We
It's
have
like
gotten to a
Christopher
point.
Columbus.
Chad.
Yeah.
But I think I do think that is an important part of the discussion, because you have to end that cycle in order for, for that abuse to stop and for the victim list to stop growing. And so you do have to at some point address the fact that like these people are the way that they are for a reason. And if we stop that reason, then we can start healing, if that makes sense. But
they
at some
aren't gonna
point
do
they are
that.
responsible, right? Like at some point they are adults and they are responsible for their actions. Just also there is a causation for, why they are the way that they are. I don't know. It's very tricky. I
think,
totally
yeah.
get you.
I think, yeah, I feel like I don't like the word abuse either, but I do feel like there's this like crazy darkness and acceptability of really horrible behavior that he has now instilled in his children is okay.
Which means it'll keep happening.
Which means it'll keep happening for sure.
Okay, so let's move past that one for now. So I do want to talk about how with Diddy's like rise to fame, he made large strides every time there was a tragedy surrounding him. And I'm curious, first of all, I'm sure you noticed that correlation, but did you notice that if you think back to our younger selves when he was coming up in, his name was starting to be known, did you notice it at that time that it was like the charity basketball event and suddenly we know who Puff Daddy is, and Tupac's murder, and suddenly there's a weird dialogue with Diddy in those goings ons. And then of course when Biggie was killed and he did that, Missing You song, and he was on the Grammys and he was all in
MTV
white
performance.
and he was all over the stage, and
that was MTV, by the way.
Oh, it was on MTV? I'm sorry. I should have known that. Yeah. So like, any thoughts or reactions about how he used these tragedies to
Catapult
get himself to the top, essentially?
I feel like when at the time I definitely bought into the fact that Diddy and Biggie were best friends. And they said that in the documentary, and I always thought that they were best friends, like in the 90s, like when I was in at that time. So like because when this documentary released, my algorithm on social media just showed a lot of people imitating Diddy on stage at the MTV Awards, singing Missing You, and like that chug step that he was doing, and he's like twirling around, and it was just so many people like imitating that, and I saw so many meme videos. And at the time when I was seeing that now, I was like cracking up, like he really was twirling around after his best friend, his quote unquote best friend was killed. And when Steve and I were watching the documentary and that clip came up on our TV, and Steve was like, wow, he's really just up there twirling it. And I was like, yes, he is just up there twirling. And so I feel like that right there was like a snap moment where I was taking myself back to, middle school, early high school stuff and, 42-year-old stuff, like, that's wild. Like,
Yeah.
kind of Erica Kirk.
I was just about to
Yes.
say that.
Yeah.
Yes. Great
Yeah.
parallel. Although we recognize it today.
Yeah.
There is a dialogue today about Erica Kirk and how weird all of this is. And I don't feel like in the 90s we were noticing, like, everyone was like, Sean Combs is grieving the loss of his best friend and he's made this beautiful song in dedication to him, and like weird that we didn't notice it was weird, but the 90s were a weird time.
I mean, hindsight is always 50-50, right? Like, I mean, they had Faith Hill, his wife.
2020.
35, 180.
I was debating of letting that go, but I think I needed to.
Sorry. 20.
Hindsight is always 50-50.
Flip a coin. But you had Faith Hill, you had Sting, you had all these other celebrities that were involved in it. The cover up was so good. Like, how would we ever question any of that? First, and also, sidebar, that was my first concert that I ever went to, P. Diddy and the Family.
Really?
Whoa.
I had the t-shirt to prove it.
Nice.
That's a fun icebreaker question. What is your first concert? Yeah, wow. Old school.
P.S. Did you say, I think you said Faith
Evans. God, what is wrong with me? Come back to reality.
Hindsight is 100. Yeah. I think the other thing, just along these lines about the way he leveraged tragedy, the other thing that they talked a lot about is the volume of shootings around Diddy and just how commonplace it was. And that's something that I know made headlines when we were young, but I can't recall if it was just like, one of those probably very racist things where it was just acceptable that, like, in the hip hop community, there are guns and this is going to happen. Like, we didn't talk about it very much. Like, I don't know, maybe your experience was different. I'm curious what you thought about the volume of shootings, the fact that no one was ever freaking charged for Tupac's murder and Suge's murder, and well, maybe Suge's murder, and then that like guy in the studio that literally was never named. Like, what is that about? It's so weird.
I thought Suge Knight was still alive.
I thought
I think he's in jail for life right now, or like serving a life sentence.
Yeah. His shooting, not his. Yeah,
was Suge shot?
Suge was shot at with Tupac in the car. He was shot at.
Yeah, but he wasn't shot, was he? I don't
What
remember.
do you mean?
I should know this, you guys. I'm the one who.
What do you mean he wasn't shot?
Here.
He was not hit.
He was not injured?
He was not hit, no.
Yeah, he was not injured.
And there wasn't a separate shooting, or is there another shooting we're referring to? Like, I know he was in the car with Tupac when Tupac was killed, but you said...
There was another shooting.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Was it there was another shooting? You're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me get back to you on that.
Yeah,
because I don't want that to distract.
Yeah. I don't...
But yeah, I guess curious, like, why you think it was so acceptable.
They're operating as like gangsters. Like, I think that's like the persona. I don't know.
Here's what I think. Because when I was in high school and like the whole East versus West and like gangster rappers and gangster rap and all that kind of stuff, what my perception was that they wrote about what they experienced. But my understanding, I thought that once they got these deals and actually had money and, could tell their stories, that they weren't still acting like that or like still engaging in, these shootouts and like, all that kind of stuff. And so that was another thing that surprised me, was that when shit went wrong to Diddy, like he would be threatening people with guns and like having that gangster like reaction, or just like the his, reaching out to allegedly connections with the Crips as security when he's in California and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I just didn't realize that the kind of gang activity was still present when they had all this money and success. Does that make sense? Like, that's what I was like, because I thought from my perspective, like, I would get kind of annoyed with, like, the media perception of them being gangsters. And it's like, well, they're telling their story. Like, that's what, hip hop, you talk about what your life was. But I always thought of it as past tense. And so watching the documentary, seeing that they were still kind of like caught up in that like life of like, live by the gun, die by the gun. You cross me, I'm going to meet, threatening and all that kind of stuff. Like, I just didn't realize, like, as wealthy and status they had, they still operated like that.
But I don't think I think I hear that. I think their telling of that story, I took their telling of that part of the story is that Puffy and Suge were fighting to be the top executives in that space over rappers. And they withheld money from rappers intentionally so that they could be the father of hip hop gangster music in their region. And so part of doing that came with this bravado of operating. And I think this is why they planted the seed of like how Puffy's dad was and his mom, of like the psychology of like, I'm a pimp and this is how like how they act in this like 70s style gangster power,
mafia-esque.
And I think that
organized crime.
I think that was a part of it.
I think, Steph,
that's what I meant.
You're describing something that I wasn't quite able to articulate, is like all of those things are true. And in my head, it's like once you have all this fame and fortune and a whole business, like a up and up business, it's not organized crime at that point. I think in my brain, like, okay, so now you handle your problems like through the legal system and through business dealings. But no, gang world is what a lot of them, not all of them, by the way, but a lot of them knew. And so that's how they solved their problems, despite the fact that they have all this fame and fortune and a huge business empire and, all of those like socially accepted, structures. They're still like, when a conflict arises, this is how I know how to deal with it, essentially. And it didn't occur to me that even though they have risen to all of this fame, that's the way that they solve their problems at the end of the day.
And I felt like my understanding of gangs was, as a kid or high school student, and I guess even still today, was, people, when you don't have your bare necessities, you resort to whatever, like, you need to get what you need, like the question of like, stealing food, or, you know what I mean? And
I think that poverty, I think gangs is about territory.
Well, and weirdly, this goes back to our conversation about community, I think. Like, it's what it's your community. It's what it's how you have protection and support, and, it's who you go to when you need something. It's like, it's just a different definition or like a different experience than what maybe the three of us know. But yeah, it's
like, I guess my point was that like when you like, poverty can lead to crime when you are trying to survive, and then you turn to a gang who's like, I will protect you, I will get you what you need, and the gang then becomes territorial. You're not crossing into this space, kind of a thing.
Yeah, you can't work with this other gang because
like I'm picturing the book, like what's it called, The Hate U Give, is that what it's called?
Oh yeah,
right. Like, it's like so again, like, I guess I just kind of felt like, I feel like my understanding was like, poverty leads to crime, and then it becomes organized, and you commit to a gang who's going to rep you and back you. And then gangs become territorial and it becomes like war, right?
Mhm.
And so my thought then is when you have money and a business and this fame and success and all that kind of stuff, then you're not really going to resort to criminal like activity to get what you need.
No. And I think that, like, sorry, not no, but like,
But that is
I-
like the
That's just all I'm saying is
misconception
I
that
see
we
what
that's
you're
what
had.
saying about,
surprised
like,
me.
that's what but I don't know why that's surprising, because like white collar crime, like white affluent men
Yeah.
commit crimes all
Do the same
time.
thing. Yeah, that's I
Yeah,
mean,
but
And
that is
also,
I feel like
but
when
I'm
you
with
say
you,
white
Steph.
collar crime, you're talking about like evading taxes and, laundering
which
and
is
like
criminal. They're
I
stealing money
know.
from people
I
who don't
know,
have
but what
it.
I was surprised by was that they're not doing like they're not
More
holding
white
people up
collar
at
crime.
gunpoint. Like
Yeah, but I think that like this is culturally, we have to realize that
Yeah.
like their territory is those young people who they're thinking they're going to eventually make rap.
yes, I'm agreeing with you.
Rappers.
I'm saying that it was the aha moment for me was that they continued in the same patterns no matter what success they found. Like no matter
Yeah.
what they had, how they went about competing was the same way that they did it, when they didn't have as much. And, it's just like it just continued on. And I know like white collar crime, like I'm not saying crime is crime. And I'm not saying I'm surprised that, I'm just surprised that the type of crime, I guess, once they had money didn't change. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't
know.
like
I guess what I'm saying is I'm surprised that you're surprised by that.
I just
Because-
didn't. I think I always felt defensive of like the Black community as when the painting of them being gangsters, and I felt like shut up, like that's what they did, and now look, they made it, so leave them alone, kind of a thing. And then I'm
Yeah.
watching this documentary, and it's like no, they didn't. It wasn't leave them alone. It's not leaving them alone. They were still doing a lot of crazy shit, and and I feel like I was kind of like, oh, I was like, when I was a kid, I was like, well, they made it and they're doing the damn thing, and shut up, like stop calling
Yeah,
them
like
gangsters.
leave them alone.
Leave them
Yeah.
alone. That's where I was as a young person. And as an adult, I'm like, I could see why people were like, there's a lot of crazy shit surrounding this East Coast, West Coast. And I hated the news talking about East Coast, West
Yeah.
Coast when I was in high school. I was like, shut the fuck up. Like,
Because it just furthers the racism
like
and the stereotypes. And
yes,
yeah.
I hated it like then. And watching the documentary not told by 50 Cent, but he executive produced, and he as a rapper was comfortable with this portrayal. I'm like, I can see why I don't know. I just hated that I was starting to be like, oh, I can see why they would report that there's a lot of violence surrounding these rappers. And I don't know. Aside from Biggie and Tupac being killed, I think I was just blissfully unaware of anything else crazy that was going on around them. And I was just like, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on here. Like, I just didn't know.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
You're reminding me of an article that I read for I think I might have talked about this last week with the research, or 2 weeks ago with the research I did for 1996, and how Quincy Jones like noticed that like the animosity was starting to heat up. And so he like called all the rappers at the time to have like an underground meeting, and he like had to like throw off the press and like, like arrange a place for them to meet, but they really actually all met at a different place. And all these rappers came together, and he was trying to be like the voice of reason of like, you guys got to stop this like East Coast versus West Coast thing. I've been in this situation before as like a music mogul. And like, I want you to just know that like before anything gets so out of hand, this is like my warning to you of like, we can come together. We can do better things with our talent than having this territorial thing.
Yes.
And rivalry. And that's when Tupac, I guess, really like won Quincy Jones over, because Tupac was like talking about, I don't know, whatever, how intelligent he is. And anyway, and that's when Tupac was thinking about leaving Death Row Records to go in a different area, go a different direction. And a lot of people left Death Row after all that happened with Suge Knight and Diddy, you know? And I think that I think
Mhm.
your point is correct, but I also think it is important to note that the documentary did talk about all the people that left Bad Boy because of the
Yeah.
violence. They did illustrate that like people didn't want to be around that. And so,
Yeah.
you know, it's important to know that like to note that the I think that goes back to the core of like who Diddy is, of like his
Mm.
like evil is a brand that people like recognize, like what you started
Yeah,
with,
and
like
left.
like they recognized it and they were like, I can't. How many times did they say in that documentary, like, I can't be around this, like I gotta leave, like this is not
The
what
thing, and I
we.
think my perspective too, as a like when this was happening in the 90s, was that if I could concede the violence and gangster, I felt like the only one was Suge Knight. But like Diddy was just as bad, if
Yeah.
not worse. Like I
Yeah.
always assumed Suge Knight was the one who would like turned this
Yes.
whole community gangster.
He was the
Like
villain in
he
in
was
the
the villain,
narrative
and
for
you know,
Mhm.
sure.
maybe just
And he
being like
is.
more East Coast, you know.
Mhm.
But Diddy
But he
was a
wasn't the only
like,
one.
yeah,
Mhm.
Diddy was really behind a lot of it,
Mhm.
Well, I
and
think that was
Yeah, and
also
that's
I
part of
think
the
crazy.
narrative that they talked about in the story, right? It's like Suge Knight
Mhm.
looks like he's like like
yeah, he's
he's
like
like
a
Yeah,
giant.
6'5",
tall,
Yeah.
like
300
you know,
pounds.
like his stance, like his grimace, like he's been in jail, you know, and like they
Yeah.
Yeah.
why people would like be afraid of him, and that's I think is to your point of like why it went undiscovered is like Puffy looks like Puffy, you know, and
He
like that
looks like the
they
Like a little
they talk
pipsqueak.
they talked about that a lot of like he like nobody was afraid of him, you know, and so
Mhm,
I think that that's part of this manipulation, right, is that he was
mhm,
able to
Yeah.
see that people don't see him capable of doing this kind of thing, and so
mhm.
while people are underestimating his ability to be evil, he's like
Evil.
doing all this other stuff underground, and he's like, what, it wasn't me, look at me, I look like Puff, I'm Puffy. I'm on Ellen,
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm twirling on stage.
you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so okay, I know we can go on for hours and hours about this topic. I think where this is taking us is I think the thing I found strange was all of the people, Manny, you just referenced that were saying he was shady. I didn't feel comfortable around him. I needed to get out of his orbit. Things were unsafe, whatever. But none of this was ever brought to uh, like the legal, space. Like no charges, at least early on, I don't believe charges had been pressed or like anyone was making any like formal allegations about his behavior. People were like so many times in this documentary, people were like, I wasn't paid. I, did all of
Mhm.
these things. I had a contract and he still didn't pay me. And I'm like, why wouldn't you sue someone when you were payment and you didn't receive it? And that part to me was really strange. Like, I don't know if this is again one of the cultural differences, but like, yeah, when it comes to like your livelihood and your income, that to me is very clear. It's very black and white. Like, I did a thing that you agreed to pay me for and you didn't pay me. You have not held up your end of the bargain, so I'm taking you to court. Like, I just didn't, that part was weird to me. I don't know if you feel the same or if I'm off base there, but it seemed strange that would come out so many years later.
Yeah.
I think
I
that
mean, it
happens
was
to a lot of
strange.
musical artists.
Yeah. And someone's even mentioned, I thought in the documentary, like, they were, Bad Boy was very intentional about how their contracts were written in that, like, very pyramid
Oh,
schemey, like
Yeah.
Diddy was the center of all the, the videos.
Yeah.
He was paid first, and
yeah. He found a way to like insert himself into
yeah, like if
everything
his
so
voice
that
was on the song, then it's kind of his song. If he appeared in your video, if he, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
but
And
then
the contract with like Danity Kane and like making the band, like you have like
Mhm.
24 hours to like read this and sign it or else you're not in the band. Like,
yeah.
Mhm.
The
Yeah, and it
equivalent of
said
that
too, like
today
that.
is
I'm sorry.
I was going to say the equivalent of that today is like The Voice or American Idol. Like they own those people. Which is,
Yeah, I felt like someone in the documentary said that they had a lawyer look at their contract and they're like, oh, was it Babs? Babs was saying, you are definitely getting fame, not fortune.
yeah.
So you have to decide, like, if that's what you want, but it's not going to be money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just crazy. Okay. We're beyond time. I feel like I have so many more questions, but let's leave it
Yeah,
there.
we didn't even talk
today.
about the victims, which I want
I
everyone to
know we didn't talk about any of the sex stuff, so we might need to revisit this one.
I think so.
Bonus episode. 99 and 2000s thing to say.
Rolling with my homies.
Okay, so maybe that's our collective confessional for today is that we didn't even make it to the real victims of Diddy.
Yeah.
Or I guess the extent of the victims that are left in his wake. So we can take that away and cover that in a bonus episode. But
yes, I do have something to say because I thought you were going to talk to us about open up for like his disdain and stuff for like the documentary. So we all know, like 50 and Eminem are boys, right? And so I referenced Rap God on our last episode. You referenced it, Karen, but I said put a pin on that.
I referenced it.
Yeah,
I referenced it because of Eminem and Monica Lewinsky mentioned.
Yes. So do you know this line that I'm about to say, Steph? From Rap God?
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, my God. Yes.
Do you know this, Karen?
I don't know. Say it, and then I might.
So he says that he spits so fast in this song. The song is freaking amazing. He says, I'm like a RAPER. Got so many SAs, huh? Wait, he didn't just spell the word rapper and leave out a P, did he?
Boop. So good.
I didn't know that one. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't catch that one.
And that was when did Rap God come out? Was that like 2024 or something? I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago.
It's so recent. And that's what messed up my search for. I was like, dang.
Monica Lewinsky.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, that one.
Wait. Eminem's Rap God was October 15th, 2013.
Wait.
Maybe this is when people are analyzing it. Okay, I see.
Okay.
Because
I was going to say that felt very recent. Yeah, 2013.
Of course, he was way ahead of his time.
Dang.
I mean,
that's why I was like, wait, this feels like it. Yes, you're correct. 2013, October 15, 2013. Wow.
Dang.
They knew some stuff.
Okay, we are going to call it there. Please keep listening as we explore more of these in early 2000s this season. Hope you're loving it as much as we are. And we'll see you next.
Hey, bitches. That's a wrap on another episode of You Can Call Me Karen. If you liked what you heard or didn't, go to our show page and leave a review. Just know we will call you out. And if, unlike my two co-hosts, you find yourself scrolling endlessly on TikTok, follow us at You Can Call Me Karen. And if you're still living in the 20th century like a boomer, don't worry. You can find us on Instagram and YouTube at YouCanCallMeKaren_pod. We love you for listening.